Welcome everyone to this mentoring lounge from the international mentoring community. I and Doug will introduce ourselves, but we wanted to acknowledge this is time to experience a mentor. And what we're doing is selecting a mentor is challenging. Doug and I can both agree to that. I'm sure some of you who are listening in can agree to that as well. But what we also want to do is how to decide who. If you are going to decide on a mentor, who would they be? And we have some characteristics that we're going to play around with. And that would seem to be the best way in which to approach this. So with that, I think it's best that Doug and I just have a quick explanation of who we are. Doug, you want to just share your relationship to IMC?
Yeah, I certainly can. I am one of the co-founders of the International Mentoring Community, and I have my own practice that is focused on all things mentoring.
And you would consider yourself a little bit of a deep, rich mentor?
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Those are two words we banter around a lot, so I just thought that I'd ask Doug at this point in time. And Stephen Hobbs here, and I am the other co-founder. I take care of the certification system and provide education support along the way. And Doug and I have had this international mentoring community for almost, it'll be pretty close to 6 years. I think we have been playing around with this. And I say playing around is because we haven't actually sort of taken a full tilt. But what we're going to do now is we see that there is a need, I guess if you want to use that word. There are people who are starting to ask us about certification. And Doug and I said, you know what? Let's give it another go. Let's see what happens. And so we're going to bring it forth to see if we can support. Doug has a very specific area he works in. I have an area I work in as well. And that's why this presentation that we're doing today rolls in really well in terms of to an experience, a mentor, knowing that that selection can be a little challenging. So how can we do it? So what we have set up is a presentation with what we're going to call the 4 sort of broad ways in which to look at this notion of selecting a mentor. And we have 4 of them here. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring them in one at a time. And the first one is what we call a domain expert. And what's happening there, and I'm going to have Doug talk a little bit about this, and I'm going to banter with him a little around writing a book. Okay, that's how we'll take a look at it, Doug. All right. So with a domain expert as a mentor, in other words, if I'm looking to write a book, I would like to get a mentor who has written a book, knows how to write a book. That's important. That's a domain expert. Another example would be as I'm into process management within my company, I want a mentor in process management. That's what domain expert's about. Now, as we start to unfold these, you might go, maybe it isn't a domain expert that I want. I may want one of the other 3. So let's see where this takes us. But to use an example, Doug, you've written a couple of books, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Now, I should also let you know, Doug doesn't know I'm going to do this banter back and forth. So I'm going to be asking some questions to draw some real life examples out and see what happens. Okay. So you've written a couple of books and they're on what? What topic?
Mentoring.
Yeah. And one of them was the gift of mentoring. The other one is called
You Are Not Alone.
And you are in the process of a third right now?
Yes. You Are Not Alone has been published and is out there. And my third book we're probably 3rd edit at this stage.
And it's about mentoring as well. From what perspective?
It's mentoring, mental health, and grief.
Okay. So when you went about getting to publish these books, did you go after a mentor of any kind?
The first one I did not. That's self-published. The second one, I looked for people that basically had the domain expertise from the writing and publishing perspective, not so much from the content of what I was writing about.
Yeah, and you also got one of those mentors who could support you in going out into the podcast world as well, right?
Yeah, that's it. And he basically is my publicist, and he has helped me secure approximately, I think I'm about 150 podcasts at this particular stage.
And so you would have identified some experts, in other words, gone out and talked to some people. What was that process like for you? Did it take a long time, short time? Did you have to do a lot of digging? Just give us a little sense of that.
Well, the main, like for me, for both books, You Are Not Alone and the one I'm currently working on, I relied quite heavily on, not so much on a mentor per se, but on a referral type process, I guess, for lack of a better choice of words. It was, I need to write a book, and this is the topic, and I was then connected to people that were basically domain experts.
Okay. And so has any of those domain experts moved into a little bit more of what we would call a mentoring role at this point in time?
So if I go book number 2, which is You Are Not Alone, no. Book number 3, yes.
In what capacity, just so that the audience might understand?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The capacity would be basically the whole writing process, and the editing process, and then we're eventually going to be having a conversation about the publishing process as well, to sort of flesh out what's going to work, what's not going to work, and all those things.
So in many ways, you identified a domain expert, and then you reached out to them to see if they would interact with you, work with you, did
Correct.
a bit of an interview with them to make sure that there was a fit, and then said to yourself, okay, I think I've got the person I want to choose, and this is the kind of expertise I'd like to tap into with you, and therefore built a relationship. Would that be a quick summary?
Yes, the one thing that I think we need to share is that at this particular stage, I basically have a couple people that I would call mentors, I guess, using that definition. So my publicist looks after all those things and works with me to help me get the experience and the knowledge that I need to have. So when I go to write more books, that I have a deeper, richer understanding of what the expectation is. But I also I'm working with the person who is doing the edits and all of that, who is helping me understand how to write at a higher level. And so I've got 2 people that I would call mentors for me. Yeah, I would call those 2 mentors from my perspective.
Okay, so by bringing that forward and just sharing with those listening in, is that from a domain expert point of view, you've got to identify who that is. Then you've got to get into some kind of conversation, invitation, which way it goes, so that you can bring them in and then have this dialogue about the kind of domain expertise you're tapping into. And I think that basic idea is what you would do if you were looking for a domain expert mentor.
And I think you need to be open-minded enough to know that one mentor may not be enough. You may, and the example I'm going to use is when I first started with Talent C, my company. that I created an advisory board, and each member of that advisory board became a mentor for me, and each one had an area of expertise. So I had somebody that was had worked at Microsoft and became my technical mentor. I had somebody that worked in the financial industry, and so they became my financial mentor. So I ended up at the end of the day with 5 or 6 mentors, each one with their own area of expertise, their own domain experience.
Great. Okay. So listening in, take what Doug is sharing here and go, okay, well, I'm going after this domain expertise. These are some of the things to be thinking about. This is an approach to have this happen. So thanks for that. Okay. So the next one, and this is one that Doug talks about a lot because you get this in your own practice. So I get it a little bit as well, is the notion of an experienced mentor. In other words, a mentor who has experience in mentoring, but may not be a domain expert to the person. Okay. So for example, we may have a mutual friend, Suzanne, and Doug goes, okay, Suzanne has some information and insight about working with the audience you have, but not necessarily about writing a book. But you would want to talk to Suzanne to get some of that insight that you could weave into the book. That would be an experienced mentor because she knows how to mentor in the area, but it isn't about how do I write this book kind of idea using the first example. Would that be fair so far?
Yeah, it would, yes.
Okay, so when I first met you, I always remember one of the phrases that you used was, well, as a mentor, you don't have to be experienced in the topic. But if you're a great mentor, remarkable mentor, memorable mentor kind of idea, you can bring that value of mentoring to the foreground. And you know what I'm talking about. Can you just share a little bit of the background and maybe with an example of this?
I think the phrase you're thinking of that I used back then and I still use to this day is industry specific experience is a nice to have, not a need to have. And so for me, I say, for example, one of my clients that I had was in the manufacturing industry. I have zero for experience in manufacturing, but what I do have is I have a high capacity, high level of understanding of mentoring processes, and so I was able to step in, provide the mentoring that they needed for one of their baby managers that they just had promoted, and did so with a great deal of confidence.
Okay, so in a very general terms then, with an experienced mentor, you're looking for that experience in mentoring, but not necessarily in the domain that you're looking at. So that's one of the considerations. What you've got to be is very clear about your goals and outcomes if you're going to involve someone, because while they know how to mentor, they got to make sure that they're clear about which direction you're going in, what's the story that you're working with, because one of the great things about mentors is that they are answering questions of the mentee and helping the mentee figure out what's a great question to ask the mentor. So they have to have that bit of a sense to juggle that dynamic. And then they have to be really keyed in, clued in on feed forward. They have to be asking, okay, are we on track? We not on track? Am I helping you the way that you need that assistance? It may have a little bit more because you've got to touch bases, and there's a bit more fluctuation like than the first one, because the first one you're just sort of sitting there, but now with this one there's a little bit more movement, and you got to make sure you got that feed forward to move forward. Any thoughts on any of those kind of ideas or add tos?
The I guess the biggest one is making sure that you have defined the you're going to bring to the organization, because you're 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 at somewhat of a disadvantage, because they're going to see you as somebody that we don't know why we brought you in here, because you don't have industry specific experience, and you need to be able to demonstrate how that can happen, where I'm able to provide the value that they're looking for, because I'm that extra set of eyes outside of the organization looking in, and I see things that they may not.
So this notion of experienced mentor can be they bring someone in to support you, or you've gone on yourself to get someone to support you. These are situations to look at as well when you go to ask someone to mentor you because of their mentoring experience, right?
Right.
Well, that leans into the next one, which is the sense of self-guidance, all right? So I use a phrase like this. Often we get in our way, and through self-reflection, you might go, I want to get on my way. I need some support about what's going on. And I often hear people go, well, that sounds like a life coach. Should I go get a life coach? And I go, okay, that's one way of looking at it, but there is another way to look at it through the eyes of a mentor, through the actions of a mentor. And this is where you might look at it and go, okay, what is it that I can do as a mentor to support someone? Okay. And for me, this has happened a few times. Is they came talking or asking me, can you coach me in this? And I'm listening, I'm going, I think, can I wear my mentor hat instead? Right? Because I think I could be of greater service to you than attempting to get at the head performance versus getting at the heart of what it is that's going on, right? We don't need to sort of brush whatever it is you're talking about to the side and get into the performance and make it happen. We may need to bring the whole picture, that holistic mentoring, reciprocal mentoring to the foreground. And so I always remember is this one is really important to find a mentor who can do that and can separate from coaching, right? And to know the subtleties that are associated with that. But also it's to go, there's a challenge here. How far do we want to dive into this and work with it and be able to bring and bubble to the surface what's going on? And I know Doug does a lot of this, and I'll get him to explain it because of the area that he's doing a lot of his work in. But I'll explain why I'm sharing this perspective. I just want to make one more little point here. And that's to, again, develop strategies and tactics that you can move forward with. Because the area that I find myself in now are those who are solo aging. They're 55 plus years young. They may or may not have gone through some kind of transition that we use tires, that retire kind of language. I tend not to use it. I talk about reframing, rescripting their next 50. And so for a lot of them, there is some aspects of guidance that's necessary, but it's also then to open up the second one, which was an experienced mentor, because often I can't necessarily go into the domain of what they may be wanting to do. From like a legacy project perspective, they may want to do something that's linked to their career, and I may not have that background kind of idea. So what I'm sharing is that I would bring my mentoring hat to the conversation from a self-guidance point of view. Doug, you interact in a very much. I'm going to just flip my words here. There's a much needed service you provide because of the area that you are interacting with. And can you share self-guidance in this area through a mentoring lens?
So the area that I'm working in lately has been the aspect of mental health. So mentoring is a part of the support structure for mental health. And so, you know, when we look at what we've been talking about here, um, I I I have some, to some extent, I guess I would call it on a lower end scale, lived experience as it relates to mental health, which gives me insight into how people may behave and how people cope with different sorts of things. And the journey, the mental health journey, is about uh, giving them the coping skills, or helping them develop the coping skills to be able to continue on their healing journey, because they are the ones that have to guide where they want to go. That would
Okay.
be that's the easiest way for me to explain.
Yeah. So there can be a lot of in your own way, and they want to get on their way, but sometimes they don't know what onto might mean, kind of idea. And that's where that self-guidance mentor, using the second one, sort of pops up. So if anything, you can probably guess what the fourth one is. Okay. And that's a long-term mentor, and it's using a combination of 1, 2, and 3. And this long-term, I associate where the possibility is that the mentoring arrangement and relationship can get to a point where the mentee can actually become your mentor. There is that possibility. That is one of the possibilities. It can still stay as mentor-mentee and have a long-term arrangement. But one of the things that clicks in for me over the long term is, can I interact with my mentee where they become my mentor because of what's happening in their life? And there's something there that would be of benefit to me. Any thoughts around this one that you would want to add in?
The one thing that seems to jump to the forefront for me is that every time I go into a mentoring relationship and I come away from that, I've learned something. So what I always tell people is that the beauty of mentoring is that whether you're a mentee or a mentor, it's a continuous learning experience, a continuous learning environment, because my mentee is going to behave or act or interact, or whatever term you want to use, to certain situations, and I'm going to be paying attention to that. And together we're going to work to be able to navigate through that. So for me, um, it becomes something more so, number one, a learning environment, but number two is the fact that it's relationship based. It's a relationship based philosophy.
And there's a certain reciprocalness that's taking place. That be true?
That's true.
Yeah. And I think that another word that I would go there is holistic, because everything's connected. You are going to interact over the long term using the other three. Oh, today we got number 2s in place. Oh, I can bring number 1 in. Let's go to 3, go back to 1, go to 2, 3. I could start mixing and matching these over the long term. There are what some people call it flash mentoring, where you come in and and out kind of idea. I always share that one of my origin stories of my company. I have a 3-minute mentor, and my interactions with her were over 3 minutes, and there was a lot happened in that 3 minutes that involved a machine gun. And it made a big difference in my life. Now, she may not have known she was being a mentor, but I celebrate the fact that I consider her my 3-minute mentor. Okay. So it had a long term for me as the mentee. which has helped me be a mentor. So I don't want to lose that dynamic. I think that that's really important here. Is there anything you would want to share about the long term, or about something I've just mentioned about how weaving and mixing and matching all of them together from your wisdom perspective?
The only thing is that if I take a step back and look at my practice, the places where I have long-term engagements are primarily driven because of the ability to make trusted relationships, to develop trusted relationships that are for the longer term.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that Doug and I would share is we're not necessarily going to do it just for the short term. Goodbye, see you later. It was great. I think if you want that kind of support, you could do coaching. That lends itself into it. But with the mentoring, there's something about, oh, hang on a minute. There's a bit of a longer term view to what's taking place here, so we can both continue to learn, to continue to share, feed forward, to continue to improve. So, okay, I think, Doug, it's probably great that we move into the next piece, which is how to select. And Doug and I sat down and said, okay, what would be some interesting ways to look at how to select? So these are not your typical ways. If you put into a search on Google or the Chat GPT world or whatever it says, well, how do you select a mentor? These are coming more from our actions as mentors. And we're going to just share these ideas with you, and let's see what happens. So the first one I'm going to take, and then I'm going to give Doug the next one so that he can share some thoughts about that one. So the first one is, does the mentor relish, enjoy the idea that we may need to go into things that have never been done? There may be a bit of a roller coaster associated. And this is a question to ask your mentor, your new mentor, you're walking into it, is, do you enjoy continuous improvement, is another way of asking it. Do you go out and seek other ways in which to become a better mentor, and just asking them about what's happening? And that's what I mean about enjoy, relish, and nurture the new industry, never done it roller coaster approach. Again, I don't think a lot of Chat GPT searches or anything else is going to talk about it in that kind of language. That links to the next one. Do you want to take this one on, Doug?
Yeah, I sure can. So having a playbook is a good idea, but at the same time, you want to be flexible enough to be able to kind of push that playbook off to the side and go with your gut instincts more than anything else. And the one thing I always tell people is that each and every mentoring session is customized to the needs of that particular person, and those needs are going to fluctuate and change over a period of time. And I, as their mentor, need to be flexible enough to be able to say, okay, what worked 2 sessions ago may not work today.
Yeah. And this next one of value conventional wisdom and are skeptical of it. Let me go back to something we shared, which is the mentor is answering the questions of the mentee. So therefore, as a mentor, how do you help the mentee ask great questions? Because great questions helps you live a great life. And that's conventional wisdom. But guess what? Sometimes you may want to be skeptical of it with the person you're interacting with. And I know Doug has an example of this where someone just sat through him having a conversation with them, but it was probably what, 95% to 5%? It was 95% yourself sharing stories and 5% them asking a question. You want to just share that story because I think it illustrates this point.
Now, is that the one where I did most of the talking and okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay. So I had a young person that was working in an organization, and the the boss brought me in to spend some time with this person because they were actually thinking of terminating her because she wasn't able to grasp the concepts and stuff like that. So I had a mentoring session with her. I normally slot about an hour. So I had slotted an hour. I talked for 45 minutes without her saying a single word. And then finally at the end, the question I asked was, you know, can you explain to me the value that you got from our conversation today, bearing in mind that I did most of the talking? And her response was that I had created a place of safety where she felt comfortable and safe in number one, listening to me, and then number two, sharing the little bit that she did, because what I found out was that it helped her identify with some experiences that she's had. And as a result of that, she felt safe and comfortable, and she went back to work without any issues. And we were able to salvage her employment so that she wasn't terminated at that stage.
Right. So what we're sharing with you is you're asking a mentor, you know, is there things you've never done before that you may want to explore because of what we're going to be talking about? Are you willing to throw your playbook out and do a little freestyling with me? Are you skeptical about some of that conventional wisdom, which means we may have to look for some other new ways of doing things? That's what we're getting you to think about, to phrase up the questions to ask that mentor. I don't think there's many people who would say to you, well, this is what would be of help as you're preparing to select your mentor. So take it into consideration, see where it takes you, okay? The next one here is, I've heard this. It's not one of the ways that I do it, but I've heard this, is that in talking to a mentee afterwards, and they say, well, what was your mentoring experiences like? And I had one person say, oh, for peace sakes, and Jennifer's sake, and for everyone else's sake, I will hope this person doesn't keep talking about, well, this person said this author said this person said this, that person said this, when I'm trying to figure out, well, what is it you want to say? That was what the person was relaying to me. And I said, oh, don't worry about that. I may bring in some conventional wisdom, but this is also coming from my wisdom, because I'm not going to ride the coattails of others. Because a lot of times when people are using other people's work all the time, it's sort of like a one-hit wonder song. And they may be getting paid royalties for it, great. But I don't think it's really what we want a mentor to be doing, is playing the same tape over and over and over again every time they get with their mentee. Anything there that touches you, Doug?
I agree with you as far as, you know, not riding on the coattails. But what I also would suggest to our listeners is, here is a learning opportunity waiting for you to grasp it. So understanding what the context of what that one-hit wonder story is all about, and then taking out of that, what are some of the things that I've learned that I could put into practice or modify, twist, turn, whichever, but that I can use to my benefit, but also to the benefit of my mentee as well, without it becoming something where it's total plagiarization.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, I would call, adaption, to be adept at adopting and adapting. There's sometimes you want to adopt it, this is helpful. Sometimes you got to adapt it. And that's what you as a mentee are wanting to ask of your mentor. Listen for that kind of languaging, all right? And that will help you in your selection. The next one is, I think it sort of goes without saying, but ask them Are you a person who shares a bit more of a simpler perspective of what's going on, or are you going to complicate things on me? Right? And what would that mean? You could ask the mentor, the potential mentor, what's a simpler way and a complicated way to talk about what I've just asked us to have a mentoring session around? And then just let them chat. So you as a mentee listening to the mentor share, right? Well, guess what? That's a great question of your mentee, of your mentor, sorry, of your mentor. These are what I mean about asking great questions as a mentee of your mentor. These are the things that will help. But also, the response helps you to make a selection decision. Anything about that one, Doug?
No, I keeping it simple versus complicated for a lot of people is a bit of a challenge, but you have to think who is the recipient at the end of the day of that knowledge. And it's your mentee. It's not so much you, the mentor, but it's definitely the mentee that you're working with. So I think, you need to be able to, it's like most of the points that we've shared on here is that it's determining what's going to work for us as we are selecting our mentor, and based on the conversation is what are some of the things that they've shared that are going to be a good fit for what I'm looking for in someone who is going to help me take the next chapter in my journey, personally and professionally.
Yeah. So let's just segue to the last one. You want to take that one, Doug? Start it off?
Yeah, I can certainly, to confirm outcomes that are legit and specific. When I read that takes me back to right at the beginning of the mentoring relationship and establishing what are the goals and objectives and what are the outcomes that we're going to work together to achieve. And we both need to make sure that those are legitimate and specific to my growth personally and professionally.
So as a mentee, asking your mentor is, how are we going to confirm the outcomes are legit and specific? You can ask your mentor that question and see what they respond back with. And one of them would be probably something like, well, we're going to be doing continuous feed forward. We're going to have some conversations about, okay, if this is what's happening, where would that take us forward? Rather than diving in all the history in the back there and bringing it forward, there would be more of what we call feed forward. So if you're listening for that, that helps you go, I think this person might be okay to interact with. So the whole idea here is just to give you these 6 points and some of our own experiences that goes with it, so that you can make a bit of a decision of where you want to go. So what's happening is we're presenting this in such a way is to give you a sense, okay, if it's time to experience a mentor and you as a mentee, potential mentee is going, yep, this is a time I need some support, I need to interact with someone, then just remember, while selecting a mentor is challenging, if you need to, come back and watch this video again, because you might find some clues along the way, but also in the description that goes with this video, where you can put comments, and we appreciate comments because we can also answer them as well. You can write down your thoughts and share them with us, because we love to learn as well. What was it that maybe we need to edit? Is there something we need to add, or do we need to alter something, or do we need to delete something where we may have stepped on our toes? This all comes in the comment section, so please do that. And therefore, we're continuing to help each other in selecting a mentoring so that it's not challenging, but yet at the same time, the selection should have a bit of a challenge to it. And I'm going to put should there, because of asking the questions to get to the correct person to support you. That's what we're after. So that means then how do you decide and who? We've given a bit of a pathway here for you. It's going to require you to go, okay, hello, let's have a conversation. Oh, hello, let's have a conversation to figure out who you're going to decide to interact with. But to be able to do that, make sure, okay, that you know what you want. You need a domain expert, someone who has the expertise that you need to be able to help you out? Do you need someone who's an experienced mentor to support you, to keep moving you forward? Do you need a mentor who's going to do a little bit of that self-guidance, get in there from a heart perspective? Or are you looking for a long term and say, oh, hang on a minute, I'm going to dig in. If you're willing to dig in, let's make it happen. This is what we're attempting to share with you today. So the whole idea here, okay, was to open up a lot of these possibilities for you. Grab these opportunities and say, hey, this is how we can make this happen. So like most videos that I do with Doug, I bring people into the mentoring lounge and welcome you and get us going. I'll give you a bit of the update about what we're going to cover. And what Doug does is he listens to something that he thinks is profound that we want to share with you. And Doug will share that with us now. When I know he's done, then I will just say, take care. And I will then stop the video. And I certainly wish you the best and take care. So, Doug, what do you want to share with us?
Having industry specific experience is a nice to have, not a need to have.
Okay, so with that, everyone, take care.